Hey guys, and welcome to ScIQ. I have with me Sam Seder, here from the Majority Report. Are you ready to talk some politics?
I am always ready to talk politics.
I'm glad, because today we're going to talk about the biggest lies of politics and how you can tell that they're lying through their body language.
Or just that their lips are moving.
Well, ironically, we happened to pick two GOP, but we've got one Democrat as well. So let's start off with Bill Clinton and probably the most famous lie in recent political history.
I want you to listen to me. I'm going to say this again. I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky.
So a pretty big moment as far as Bill Clinton's career goes.
Yeah, and I think there probably is a couple of lies packed in there. I mean, this obviously came out of it was basically sort of a setup to a certain extent. I mean, they were investigating the Clintons over something called Whitewater, which never panned out. And so Ken Starr, the independent counsel at the time, decided to just keep expanding the investigation, sort of like how Benghazi turns into an email, right? But in this instance, he had been deposed, and they asked him if he had ever had sexual relations with Monica Lewinsky. He basically said it depends on what the definition of is. But here, yeah, he lied. He lied about having sex with her, and maybe it was the present tense, and maybe he himself never told anybody to lie. So he's doing some major parsing. And as far as lies that get told by politicians, this one doesn't bother me as much as ones that actually impact me as a citizen. I don't really care. I had a lot of other issues with Bill Clinton beyond what he's doing on off hours.
Yeah, and this lie in particular is pulled out in a lot of case studies as one of the most obvious political lies, because there was three things going on. One, he was distancing himself by calling her that woman. He didn't want to use her name, so he's trying to be a little bit distant from her.
Right. I would never have sex with someone I have lack of intimacy with.
Yeah, because he didn't just say, I never had sex with Monica Lewinsky. He said, I did not have sexual relations, as being a vague term, with that woman, someone far over there. The second was, he was trying to get out of the whole situation, because before that clip, he said, look, I got to go back to writing my State of the Union address. But look, let me just quickly touch on it. So he was trying to make sure that he didn't have to say any more than is strictly necessary and get out of there as soon as possible. People are trying to run away from you, they're probably not telling the full truth. And he also, you can see from his facial expressions, he was trying to use the vaguest possible terminology. He wasn't making eye contact with anyone. I
did notice that. Yeah.
So he's trying,
but he kept his eyes open. He was sort of averting his gaze to the
Yeah. So he's trying, you can see his lack of comfort there. He's not proudly saying, look, I didn't do it. He's trying to hunch in.
Yeah, and I would say the only thing I would say, just to repeat, I guess, to go over that terrain that was more a politician's lie as opposed to a political lie. I think some of the other ones that you have...
So let's have a look at one of those. This is George H.W. Bush telling us to read his lips.
Opponent won't rule out raising taxes, but I will, and the Congress will push me to raise taxes, and I'll say no. And they'll push, and I'll say no. And they'll push again, and I'll say, read my lips. No new taxes.
Didn't turn out exactly the way he planned.
No, it turned out there were new taxes. I mean, part of it is that, of course, he's running against somebody who was from Taxachusetts, and so he wanted to show that. And part of it was the Republican base did not trust George Herbert Walker Bush. They thought that he was not sufficiently conservative. And this was also sort of a dog whistle to them. I mean, it both had that quality of like, I'm not, I'm a tough guy and I'm not going to bend, and you can trust me to fight and stave off the Democrats in Congress. But it was also a way of saying, like, and I'm going to adhere to a conservative Republican orthodoxy. And, that was an important pitch he had to make to people who had elected in Reagan. And, to a certain extent, I think at that moment he probably thought he was going to say that. So that was, it's a bit of a lie, because he said that I'm definitely, when we get to that juncture, I'm definitely going to say no way. And of course he said, okay, way. but to a certain extent, it's an overpromise.
So do you think that he intentionally lied, or do you think it was a bit of he meant it at the time?
I think he meant it at the time. I mean, I think that was a calculation they meant. Like, we'll definitely try. I think he just turned out to be not the guy that he thought he was. And frankly, to his credit, I mean, we needed to raise taxes.
Yeah. I think it's interesting to see him talking in that clear, forthright way with eye contact with the audience compared to the previous clip with Bill Clinton. He's trying to be as forthright as possible. Whether psychologically he knew he was lying or not is kind of irrelevant. He was trying to clearly convey honesty and truth.
Yeah, and strength, I think, too. And it's interesting because I think his son adopted that version of his dad. You know, his dad some other times where he was a little bit sort of fuddy-duddy and got a little bit lost. But his son, I think, when he ran for office, not Jeb, but George Jr., I think he adopted that and never really did anything but that.
Well, speaking of George Jr., let's have a look at our third lie, ironically from George Jr. himself.
Saddam Hussein has gone to elaborate lengths, spent enormous sums, taken great risks to build and keep weapons of mass destruction. Nuclear weapon, nuclear weapon, nuclear weapon.
Active chemical munitions bunkers, mobile production facilities.
We know he's got chemical weapons. He's got them. He's got them. He's got them.
So that was a lie that got told a lot and was only kind of recently outed as being completely false.
Well, I don't know about that. I think it was completely false as of, very early after the invasion. In fact, I mean, we had weapons inspectors who were on the ground. And to invade Iraq, George W. Bush told the UN to pull them out. They hadn't found anything after 2 or 3 months. I mean, so that lie to me is perhaps one of the biggest lies of the modern era from a politician, because if you measure it in terms of how many people died because of it, how many people signed on to a war because of it, that lie is pretty big. I mean, you're right. There was a couple of them that was associated with that. Dick Cheney delivered a few. Colin Powell, supposedly he didn't know that he was lying, but he was lied to. And you can't say that Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction at that point, because clearly they did not have evidence of it. They thought they were going to find evidence and they were going to be able to make the case in some way. And they couldn't even find enough evidence to even sort of spin the case. They found nothing in terms of weapon mass destruction, even when they tried to wiggle a little bit on weapons of mass destruction. So that was a big lie in terms of how many people he told it to, how many people it influenced, and the cost associated with it.
And it's interesting from a cognitive psychology perspective as well, is because sometimes when people are trying to see something, it doesn't matter about the strength of the evidence. You can show them a picture of, of something like another one is planes having missiles under them when they hit the trade towers. Some people, no matter what photos you show them, they're going to be adamant that there were missiles attached to that plane, and that's just what they're going to see. It doesn't matter if you show them 100 photos from different angles showing that there were no missiles, they still will be convinced. And I think there was a bit of fooling himself involved in that one, because it doesn't matter what evidence he saw, he still was going to see the same thing.
Well, we know now from the historical record that the day after 9/11, they were already talking about invading Iraq. And we also know that this had been an idea that had been floating around for a while, and a lot of the people around George Bush, including Dick Cheney. And so this was an opportunity for them. And the country was in a real mood of vengeance and wanted strength. So I'm not convinced that, George Bush couldn't have said, let's attack Canada. It's just that it would have been a harder sell. I think there was too many people who wanted to believe and who had signed on to that war for other reasons that didn't necessarily have to do with weapons of mass destruction, but ideas about projecting democracy, or that there was something fundamentally wrong with Muslims, or this notion that we need to pop the terrorism bubble, I think, as Thomas Friedman said. So there was a lot of people who were willing to buy into that lie, despite the fact that, like you say, there was, ample evidence that that was not true. I mean, that speech was given in January of 2003, 2 months before we went in there. There were weapons inspectors on the ground, and there were stories in the press saying, the weapons inspectors are asking the CIA, hey, you know those weapons of mass destruction you keep talking about? Where are they? Because we've combed the country and we can't find them. Yeah. And apparently the CIA kept saying, like, we have bad reception. We can't pick you up the phone or something.
Even the CIA has bad reception sometimes.
Yeah, well, when they want to.
Well, thanks for chatting
My pleasure.
us with the biggest lies. Hopefully, you know, as the election goes on, we'll be able to renew this list and we'll have some more.
I have a feeling
discuss.
we probably will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll see you next time on ScIQ.
Bye-bye.
Hi everyone, I'm Jayde Lovell, resident science nerd on the Young Turks network. You're watching ScIQ and we know you don't want to miss an episode, so please click the subscribe button down below.